Nick, get up. We've got an E3 to burn.
Hopefully we'll burn through this E3 as fast as they did, because they didn't waste any time.
Their time was wasted.
Wow. Greetings and salutations. My name's Nick, this is the Tin Man, and thank you for stopping by and taking a look at our E3 coverage for 2019. What did you think of it?
There was a couple standouts this year. I feel like it was less, there was just less to it, because Sony sat it out, a couple big guns didn't participate too much. There was no lack of games. There was no lack of gameplay. No. So it didn't feel really vacant. Like I was a little concerned it might be. I think, Sony dropped their big nukes beforehand, which maybe stole some thunder. But everyone else came to play.
And by their nukes beforehand, you're referring to
Death Stranding.
Specifically Death Stranding.
Yeah.
But otherwise, Last of Us 2.
Sure.
Their samurai game, The Ghosts of
Tsushima.
That wasn't really mentioned anything. Do you think Sony was hurt by their lack of presence?
I would say no. I don't feel like they're missing out here. I think they know what they've got. They know they've got dominance, so they didn't need to come to play, because they are so far ahead of Xbox this generation, and Nintendo is gonna do what Nintendo does. So it's not really even a competition for them. They know they didn't need to do anything, and they can hold their cards at this point for the next gen stuff until next E3, because it's still, well into 2020 where we begin to see that stuff.
But you could also say that Microsoft didn't really have that much to show for its own studios.
Not at all.
Microsoft's big show was for its third-party stuff. It's like, come to the Xbox One, not for the Gears of War, not for Halo Infinite, but check out all this stuff the Game Pass can get for you. All this stuff the Ultimate Game Pass. And there was something in your notes. You mentioned how this entire, this E3 specifically was about everybody trying to push their pass on the customer.
Everyone wants their own proprietary streaming service. They all want to be Disney Plus. Also, Plus is the buzzword of the year because it's everywhere. And I think, between the Stadia, between Xbox Game Pass, between Epic Game Pass, everyone wants their own proprietary streaming platform. This might be the last console generation as we know it, because from here on out, I think everything will be streaming. I think everything will go the way of the way Stadia is paving.
Well, that's also assuming that these things are going to be successful. I mean, you look at Ubi Play, and what do they have to offer? Ubisoft has managed to acquire quite the library of games, but consider that a lot of the games they're advertising for Ubi Play are like Prince of Persia, the original version, Splinter Cell, the original version. Their promise for the new games is pretty much the bigger draw there. And then you've got Xbox merging your passes. You got Stadia.
What was your big picture? How did you end up feeling? What's your general impression before we dig into any details? How did it make you feel? Did it give you the feels? What's the hashtag mood?
General impression was just that it was largely, basically, it's just a series of announcements. Without necessarily any particular interest in theme.
Less fanfare, less flourish, less live music acts, less...
That might be a good thing.
I agree.
Especially with Sony's E3 last year.
Yeah.
Every video game had to have a live music
dance
acts.
number.
There's a lot of games that are just here is the new games, and now here are our remasters of these old games.
That's true. Especially Square Enix.
Square Enix, half of their panel was just remakes and remasters. Half of Nintendo's panel was remakes and remasters.
Maybe that's just a sign of the times that our generation, who are collectors, have their nostalgia, and they're less interested in the new stuff. So they really need to appeal to that nostalgia factor and want us to relive with better graphics, better gameplay for sure. In the terms of Final Fantasy VII, I think maybe not 8, because 8's just a reskin, right? It's just a
8 is just a remaster.
Yeah. So,
but you consider games like maybe The Last Remnant.
Sure.
Who actually played that?
You.
I haven't played The Last Remnant.
I thought you were a JRPG dude.
Not
so
as much
for
as
the
I
next
could.
year, so- okay.
Like
the time?
Square announced. Not Square. That's they didn't make the Tales of series.
Right.
I think it's what Namco Bandai makes Tales of.
Yeah. They have like
I still have
games that are all super throwback and like.
But I've never
Japan
actually
only.
finished a Tales of game. I'd like to, but it's
Who
on my
has the
list
time?
of things to do.
Yeah.
What would you have liked to see that wasn't there, though? Because they had a lot of game announcements.
That's true. Some things were glaring omissions, and some things just didn't get the fanfare that I kind of expected. I think, some things I had to track down rather than see them at a conference, just because they're more obscure studios or smaller studios.
I had to track down information as to what Crossfire was.
I didn't know what that was either, and it looked like it's Ace Combat, basically, or it's apparently very popular in Japan, but
It's
not at all here.
It's very popular in China and Korea.
Yeah.
And is not in a board game with a sick commercial.
Right.
Crossfires. That's exactly what I think.
That's what I was hoping it was, and I was like, can it just be Crossfire? Can I just play multiplayer Crossfire?
But something they don't mention at E3 is they mentioned it in the I believe in the PC Gamer preview of it, is that Remedy is making the single player campaign for Crossfire.
Oh my god.
They should have opened with that.
I love Remedy because so Max Payne 2 favorite game of all time. Alan Wake, it's number 4 or 5 for me. So they set a very high pedigree. So I was looking for Control, and I wasn't disappointed. It's coming. It looks interesting. The interviews, right? They're just the Finns are very somber people, and they're just so serious. And the fact that they never had a big cool presentation, I think kind of understates and undersells the game. And I'm a little concerned because I think Death Stranding is going to steal so much of that thunder of that odd mysticism, metaphysical. I think they're kind of taking their shtick a little bit, with the good acting, but. I have faith. I'm going to buy the game because I buy all their games, and I think the protagonist looks really interesting, but yeah, I feel like those sort of things. I think there were a couple games that I really wanted to see. Where was, Beyond Good and Evil 2? That's huge, but Ubisoft was so busy hyping Watch Dogs Legion, which rightly so looks amazing, but. They need to hype up.
Yeah.
They need to build these more obscure, not so easily defined games.
Because it's easier to sell a game that takes place in London,
right,
than this weird game in space with pigmen.
Right. And by that same token, I guess you could say that Skull and Bones, pirates aren't really cool right now, so maybe they're just kind of going to hold on to that until pirates come back around, release a new pirate movie or something, because Skull and Bones looks amazing. It's a naval combat game by
Wait for
Ubisoft.
the next Pirates of the Caribbean,
right?
Since they're rebooting the series.
Let's do it. Just ride that wave, I did notice in terms of trending, I feel like everything was Game of Thrones. Everything's high fantasy, dragons, even Japan stuff. Every studio was we gotta have a Game of Thrones game. But by that same token, it's cool to see George R. R. Martin getting into making games.
Although it's kind of, wondering, I kind of wonder what kind of interaction they're going to have. What kind of role he's going to play in the making of that game.
Just world building or design? Probably not. I don't know. What did you feel was a glaring omission? What were you missing out on that you wanted to see?
Well, Metroid Prime 3, definitely.
Sure. Okay. Nintendo had a stacked deck. They didn't need to play that card. I think they're gonna be fine.
Oh yeah, there's no way Nintendo's going to fall apart.
Yeah. There was fears there. I was worried, but maybe a decade ago. But I think they brought it full circle. Citizen Switch is a sound investment at this point. I mean, they had such a good catalog listing and so many strong titles. It's amazing how far they've come with this console.
Very true. I would also argue that this E3, as for several of the companies, focused more on the developing of their community and the maintaining of their community. Not just the few presentations that brought out their community managers, but the people who are okay, you've played this previous game, you've played Ghost Recon Wildlands.
Sure.
Let's carry you over to Breakpoint.
Oh, totally.
You've been playing Fallout 76.
Yep.
We want to keep you around. And I feel nobody represents the idea of trying to maintain community. Is EA.
That's true. Yeah.
Like, you look at their presentations, they had a very limited presentation this year, but all the things they presented, Battlefield 5, Madden, FIFA, uh,
I mean, they're catering to the lowest common denominator. It's
Eight-
like if you want to sell 10 times as much, dumb it down as much as possible, right? Make it good for everybody, the most casual gamer.
perhaps, but there's also a market for that.
Oh,
Like,
totally.
they spent a lot of time focusing on The Sims 4, but I
Right.
feel that the kind of presentation they had wasn't meant for, like, you get all the gamers to watch the one thing.
Right.
You make the one thing so that, like, the Sims 4 fan who's been waiting for island living to be like,
All the 50-year-old grandmas. You mean my grandma who plays The Sims still? Yeah, she can't wait.
and the person who wants to know more about Apex Legends,
Sure.
they just watched the Apex
Sure.
Legends part. The person who wants to know about the only new game that they have making, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order.
That actually looks pretty good, and I hate that it does. I really do, because I don't want to give EA another dollar.
Well, you'll have to give them $60
At least.
At least.
It looks good.
It looks like Uncharted with Star Wars,
Yeah, exactly.
which is especially interesting because they canned the project that Amy Hennig was
Supposed
writing.
to do, right, yeah.
So that would have just been Uncharted with Star Wars. So,
Yeah.
although I think, like, the EA could have definitely picked, they could have definitely picked a more interesting section of the game
Oh, totally.
to try to show that
It was
off.
extremely bland. It reminded me of like what it looked like just any chunk of Force Unleashed, basically, with better graphics and maybe better lightsaber play. But I think the notion that you can be light or dark sided, I think the acting, the character focused stuff is going to be far superior. It looks interesting enough.
Not to mention, it gives it gives Forrest Whitaker's Saw Gerrera
That's true.
like a chance to actually do something, considering he got
More than
basically
get
kicked
buried
out
by
of
a
Rogue
mountain.
One.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. In terms of like EA stuff, the Star Wars stuff does still have me. Like, I do buy those games just because I'm a pretty big Star Wars fan, and they're fun. All my friends play them. All the Star Wars cosplayers plays them. It's a good community thing, and it's not going anywhere. They bought our childhoods, and we have to keep giving them money forever. Forever.
You don't have to watch this video forever though, but you can come back later for the rest of our E3 coverage later on today.